Nyanji Chamber so than him, young zone and Holland Chamber in a jab the Packer, Targam Santo, Sherman, Doston, but 3G and La Shamter Low, Nature was saying his Jankan. Jahur 3G and the alarm, Jimmy Ponzo, La Sora, and the going to Toban Power, Shinji, Low.
The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficulty encountering billions of aeons. I now see it here to receive and uphold it, vow to fathom the Tathaga's true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Currently, we are studying the Surangama Sutra, and we are studying the various roots, the 6 roots, and we have covered the ultimate, which is the pure root, as well as the ordinary roots. In another word, we can call it the ultimate roots and then the conventional roots, or pure roots and impure roots. Each of the roots can have the pure roots and the impure roots. This particular teaching is a little bit different than the ones that we've studied in the Sutrayana and Vajrayana teachings, and the teachings included in the Abhidharma can be more detailed when it comes to the analysis of the roots. However, the examples as well as the functions that's expounded in this particular sutra still worth our detailed studies. Previously, we have already covered the eye, ear, and nose roots. Oh, we haven't talked about the nose yet. Really?
Wow. 好嘛。那
Let's look at the root of nose. Smelling occurs because of the 2 appearances of penetration and obstruction, and they're like firmly adhere to quietude, to what originally was wonderful perfection. The essence of smelling reflects the sense, and it takes in sense to become the organ of the nose. In its pure state, the organ of the nose is the 4 elements. It takes the name nose organ and is shaped like a double-hanging claw of the superficial sense organs and the 4 defiling objects. This one probes out after sense. The nose, the object to the nose is scent. First of all, when it comes to the roots of the nose, it has the appearances of penetration and obstruction. Those are the dusts. The 2 types of dusts would work in correlation with one another. And then within the Buddha nature, it would firmly adhere. Previously, we had already explained that there is the pure causes and condition, or within the wondrous manifestation of Buddha nature, there would be the adherence or a mingling situation happening that is the smelling sensation. But the nature of such is pure. Out of the causes and conditions, since it has already adhered to the dust, then the previous pure nature has been obstructed. And then the essence of smelling reflects the sense, and it takes in sense to become the organ of the nose. At the time of receiving the sense from the objects, it becomes the root of nose. And at that time, this is the pure root. It is the source of the ordinary root, because the nature of the ordinary root is the pure root. it is the nature of the purity of the four great elements, or the four great elements in its pure foundations. These pure roots are the kinds of roots within the mind stream of the noble ones. And those are the roots that we refer to when we talk about the six penetrations. So the noble ones, at the time of using their pure smelling sensations, or having that pure smelling sensations through such ultimate roots, you can call it the ultimate truth, the ultimate roots, or the pure roots. It is no longer part of the nature of the four great elements, because the four great elements has already been purified. But the purity of the four great elements is its nature. It is just like to say that the five consciousness has already transformed into the five wisdom. And that's the pure roots. It is no longer part of the four great elements. And this root, at the time of being manifested in the conventional sense, we call it the ordinary root. The ordinary root, it takes the shape of the nose. It has shape, it has its form. And that's the nature of it. When we call it, that's the nature of its ordinary root. Within the nose, there's the description of the two claws. And through that, you would be able to perceive the sense of the outer objects. According to the school that holds on to existence, they would still think that it has a shape. It looks like two claws, just like two fingers. Paralleled into the inside of the nose. It has that particular function. In some ways, we can say that in the modern science, when we study that there are perceptors of the nose, and then there are the perceptors inside our brain that would then generate such sensation of smelling. And then it says that of the superficial sense organs and the four defiling objects, the defiling objects then refers to the form, sense, shape, and tactile sensation or touches. Then this one probes out after sense. The four particular roots, the sense organs, goes after different defiling objects, and this one probes out after sense.
然后呢，就是降到应该是第四个啊，就是第四个的这是第三个、第四个。然后
Now let's look at the fourth one, which is the root of tongue. Tasting occurs because of the two blends of blandness and variety. And they're like firmly adhere to quietude in what originally was a wonderful perfection. The essence of tasting reflects the flavors and becomes intertwined with the flavors to become the organ of the tongue. In its pure state of the organ of the tongue is the four elements. It takes the name tongue organ and is shaped like the crescent moon. Of the superficial sense organs and the four defiling objects, this one pursues flavors. Now over here, the object to the sense organ of the tongue is blandness and variety. Blandness is something that is rather flavorless, and then variety refers to the flavors such as the sour, sweet, bitter, and spice or spiciness. Whatever kinds of flavor they are, they're simply the defiling objects. or dusts. After being intertwined and working, correlating to each other within the perfect Buddha nature, there then adheres to quietude. In what originally was wonderful perfection, the essence of tasting reflects the flavors and becomes intertwined with flavors to become the organ of the tongue. Also, the nature of the organ is pure. In its pure state of the sense organ of the tongue is the four elements. That is the nature of it. And then, again, only the noble ones within the mind stream of the noble ones would have such a pure root. They can taste the purity of the nature of Dharma. But for ordinary beings, we can only taste the flavors such as sweet, spicy, sour, bitter, and so on. But the noble ones, though that it seems that they also have the same tongue as we have, however, they would be able to taste the nature of the Dharma and the taste of dhyana, all of such kinds of flavors. What is the nature of the superficial tongue organ then, or the ordinary tongue organ? It takes the shape of crescent moon. According to Abhidharma, it says it's half of a moon. That's the shape of the tongue. According to the Sabhativada school, the school that holds on to existence or certain realism, also some of the Buddhists would consider as a tongue there are lots of perceptors or the taste buds. And because of the taste buds that's spread all over the tongue, then the different flavors can be perceived, and then there is this reflection from our neural system of reflecting on this particular food is too sour, too spicy, too bitter, and so on and so forth. I believe when we studied biology, the description of the tongue is also as a crescent, and then at the tip of the tongue, usually that's where you would taste most of the sweetness, and then on two sides, sour and salty, and then at the back is bitterness. So the organ of the tongue usually would taste bitterness. Other than that, there's no other way to taste the bitterness. 2,500 years ago, the Buddha had already taught that the tongue organ is also a form, and by relying on this form, this ordinary root, it would be able to receive the kinds of tasting sensations. So it pursues flavors. The tongue organ, according to Buddhist logic, the five organs are called the tongue organ belongs to one of the five form organs, which is the same as stated in Abhidharma. And the form organs receives or perceives the object first with direct perception. After the direct perception, then there is the dualistic thought that arises from consciousness by differentiating whether this is bitter or spicy, and then there is the perception. So the nose organ itself doesn't have the ability to make analysis of saying this is this particular scent or that. It simply just receives the information, just as whenever we use a camera to take a picture of the external phenomena, then we would show it to the others, and other people would say that, oh, this is beautiful, and oh, I don't like that picture. Though at the time, the nose can already perceive the object, but the nose root, the sense organ itself, does not differentiate the sensations. It is also, we can think in such a way that in a garden, we're at the same time of eating candy and hearing beautiful sound and looking at beautiful flowers, and there is drizzles of rain that's touching your body. All of those kinds of objects can be sensed by your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body simultaneously. However, at the same time, you would not be able to have 5 different kinds of dualistic thoughts simultaneously. That is not possible, though simultaneously you can feel them. To give you another example, if you were to be given 5 different documents, you can only take care of each of them one by one, but not simultaneously. That was the tongue organ. Let's look at the body. Sensation occurs because of the 2 frictions of separation and union, and they're like firmly adhere to quietude in what originally was wonderful perfection. The essence of sensation reflects contact and ceases upon contact to become the organ of the body. In its pure state, the organ of the body is the 4 elements. It takes the name body organ and is shaped like a tabla. Of the superficial organs and the 4 defiling objects, this one is compelled by contact. The object to our body organ is the separation and union. Within those 2 categories, there's the heavy and light and so on and so forth, all of those kinds of defiling objects. At the time of separation or at the time of separation or union, that is the object to the body. At the time of having frictions of the separation and union, all kinds of dusts within, then out of the pure causes and conditions within the perfect, the wonderfully perfected, there is the adhering or the mingling happening. And then from this pure brightness, there is the sensation. There is the sensation that's called the essence of sensation, reflect contact and ceases upon contact to become the organ of the body. And that is the pure aspect of it, is the pure 4 great elements. But the superficial organ or the ordinary organ, though the true nature of it is also the pure 4 great elements, the ordinary root of the body actually takes the shape of a tabla. As you probably are quite familiar with tabla, and the shape of it, it has 2 ends that's larger, and then in the center it's smaller. I remember that according to Abhidharma, the description of the sensation of body is just like the skin of a bird. But over here, the example is the tabla. The now statement of the sense of touch spreads from the spine. And then the spine is the place where the spine is where our spinal cord and the neural system, the most important neural system, will gather. If one were to harm the spine, then one could become either a vegetable or get paralyzed. The most important part is all the way from the neck to the tailbone, and that's where most of the neurons are. And then if the neurons would spread all the way from that center to the other parts of the body, just like the shape of a tabla, that in the center it's smaller but then spreads out to two ends, and then the two ends gets bigger. Another aspect is that the spine, around our spine or inside our spine, there's the spinal cord. If there's a disconnection with the spinal cord, of the neurons of the spinal cord were to have any issues, then it would be very difficult still, even with the advancement of our technology and medicine, to reconnect them. And the medical science nowadays would state that it's the neurons and neurons that would reflect the sensations and feelings of the human body. But over here, the particular teaching talks about that the tabla-shaped body organ is compelled by contact. Also, in the Chinese translation, the tabla is rather empty in the center, so that there is a space in the center. And then, again, this superficial organ and the four defiling objects, out of all of them, this one is compelled by contact. And then the next one is knowing. Knowing occurs because of the two continuities of production and extinction, and they're like firmly adhere to quietude in what originally was wonderful perfection. The essence of knowing reflects the Dharma and grasps Dharma to become the organ of the mind. In its pure state, the organ of the mind is the four elements. It takes the name mental cognition and resembles seeing in a dark room. Of the superficial sense organs and their four defiling objects, this one chases after dharmas. Now, when we look at the mind, the object of the mind is all the phenomena, and all the phenomena has birth and death, the production and the cessations. That is the characteristics of the conditioned dharma. Now, all of them would then firmly adhere to quietude in what originally was wonderful perfection. The essence of knowing reflects Dharma and grasps Dharmas to become the organ of the mind. And the essence of knowing at this point reflects the dharmas, all of the external phenomena, and then started to perceive all of those dust of the dharma. In the pure state, that is the part of the mind stream of the noble ones, it is the pure state, or the pure four great elements. The organ of the mind is the four elements at its pure state. And at the time of taking the name mental cognition, it resembles seeing in a dark room. That is then the superficial sense organ. For the mundane being's mind stream, it is the superficial organ of the mind. In fact, what it means is that at this point there is a cognition and thoughts. According to Abhidharma, the root itself, the organ itself, does not have dualistic thoughts. So it is also part of the direct perception. So the direct perception of mental cognition does not have dualistic thoughts. It is because of the tinted mind that comes in, or the sixth consciousness at the time of being mingled into this direct perception, there is the dualistic thoughts. So the example is that it is just like in a dark room, rather seeing in the dark room. According to the commentary as well as the Right Mindfulness Sutra, there is the description of the shape of it is just like a lotus. I'm not sure if the lotus refers to the shape of our heart. I'm not quite certain of that, and I don't quite understand it, because when we studied Abhidharma in the Gateway to Knowledge, also there is the description of the various roots. I believe that's the first chapter, and in the chapter of the 5 aggregates, all of the teachings within the Theravada traditions would use the various examples to talk about the 5 roots. And then at the time of discussing the root of mind, there is no example associated to it. But over here, the example given is the seeing in a dark room. There is no particular seeing in a dark room, as you can understand. But it seems that the great masters of the past would describe it as the shape of flesh, or shape as a lotus. But our mind doesn't have a shape or color. So the descriptions of the past masters of saying that they are like the lotus or the a ball of flesh is a bit difficult to understand. The Tibetan translation particularly states that the mental cognition is like seeing a quiet room. But the quiet may also refer to dark too, or a pitch black room. All the previous roots were explained within an example of something with a form. However, the description of this particular one is not necessarily something with a form, but there are great masters that gives the example of the various things that has a shape, especially the description of a lotus and a ball of flesh. The mind doesn't necessarily refer to heart, the heart organ. So I think it definitely requires some of our contemplation. The example, I think, is all right, but I'm not quite sure why some of the explanation says that it is the shape of a lotus flower. And then over here it says that of the superficial sense organs and therefore divinely objects, this one chases after dharmas. The 6 organs, originally they were pure, and within the Buddha nature, they can be used interchangeably, and they can be used without any obstruction. That is why it is called the perfectly penetrating roots. If we were to be able to penetrate one particular root, then we would be able to penetrate all of them. If the sentient, it is only the sentient beings that has been blocked and obstructed by ignorance. The 6 roots are now have all kinds of barriers. If we can see through one particular root, then we would be able to see through all of them, penetrate all of them. There was an example that we studied last time, that's a doctor. A doctor, for example, studies Tibetan medicine or Chinese medicine that would be able to cure the patient's illness, whichever kinds of pain the patient is enduring. As these kinds of doctors usually views the body as one system. They would ask various questions, such as how's your sleep? How's your mood? Have you had something that's too spicy? Let me look at your tongue. Open up your mouth. Oh, so it is. And then when people ask, well, what kind of illness do I have? And then the doctor would say, oh, not a big deal. You can just rebalance your body a bit. And some would probably even say that this is the illness caused by your previous karma. You just need to chant more of the Vajrayana mantra to release life and 3 times of Wandu. But for Western doctors, the Western doctors work in such a way that they would separate each of the roots, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. In this way, it is similar to how as mundane beings we cannot recognize the nature of our Buddha nature because they are completely separated and obstructed. For this reason, we're talking about that. And then Ananda here, the Buddha tells Ananda saying that in this way the 6 organs occur because that bright enlightenment has a brightness added to it. Thus, they lose their essence and adhere to falseness and create light. So Ananda, do you understand? The 6 roots initially would be able to perceive with great penetration, but now it cannot perceive with penetration. Why is that? It is because the Buddha nature, though as being completely bright and it upholds the nature of awakenment that could penetrate to each other. Sometimes the translation is a little bit difficult to understand because the translation kept on using different words. For example, over here it says that it has a brightness added to it, and this brightness added to it refers to the first thought of ignorance. Because of this first thought of ignorance, thus these bright, 6 organs that has the bright enlightenment would lose their essence and adhere to falseness and create light. Because of the falseness, you would lose the essence of all the organs, and then all of the pure, bright nature and the light of wisdom would be lost. And then there is the adherence or mingling to falseness and create light. The falseness would mingle with the 6 roots, which then would lead the sentient beings to continue to wander in samsara. This is really wonderful at the time of studying the Surangama Sutra. I think if we can study this well, then we would be able to understand how the sentient beings get confused, and at the time of confusion, how the 6 roots actually take part in it. And then the Buddha continued to say that, therefore, apart from darkness and light, there is no substance to seeing for you now. The sentient beings that's suffering and that's wandering in samsara, apart from darkness and light, there is no substance to see for you now. Other than the noble ones, the mundane beings would not be able to perceive anything if there is a lack of object. Apart from movement and stillness, there basically is no disposition of hearing. When there is a parting of the object of hearing, then you would not be able to hear anything either. This is from the ear faculty. And then without a penetration and obstruction, the nature of smelling does not arise. Again, without any of the object of the nose, then you would not have any smelling. That's from the nose faculty's point of view. In the absence of variety and blandness, tasting does not occur. Same to the faculty of tongue. If there is no various kinds of taste, blandness or variety, sweet or sour or spicy, then without such kinds of objects, even if you have the tongue faculty, you will not be able to taste. In terms of the faculty of body lacking separation and union, the sensation of contact is fundamentally non-existent. So without the dust of separation and union, which is the object of body, even you have the body, there is no sensation of contact. For the mind, then, without extinction and production, knowing is put to rest. If the production and cessation were to be lacking, then there is no knowing. If there is no object, then there is no mind. There is no object that is a phenomena, then there is no mind. This is the teaching given to Ananda, saying that the being lost in samsara is very much correlated to how our roots get entangled with the objects. If there is no object, then there is no six roots consciousness. And of course, that has something to do with the habitual tendency of ignorance. The Buddha then continued to say that you need only not follow the 12 conditioned appearances of movement and stillness, union and separation, blandness and variety, penetration and obstruction, production and extinction, and brightness and darkness. So the Buddha said that as long as you do not follow these 12 conditioned appearances that are the objects of the six roots, such as movement and stillness, union and separation, blandness and variety, penetration, obstruction, production and extinction, brightness and darkness, all of those 12 conditioned appearances. Or, in another word, the form, sound, taste, touch, and dharma. As long as you do not follow the objects, then you can recognize the nature of your mind and attain realization. If you don't follow the 12 conditioned appearances, accordingly, extract one organ from adhesion. For example, one organ, the nose or ear faculty, then from that one particular root, free it and subdue it at its inner core. Beginning from one particular faculty and then practice upon it, it can become the door and then the entrance to attain the penetration of the faculty. That was how arhats and great masters of Zen school or the Vajrayana school, at the time of one of their six roots facing one particular object, and then they can attain realization because of one particular realization of one root. For example, hearing some sound or tasting some flavor, seeing something, or touching something with the body, then they would be able to attain realization. So through one route, you would be able to attain realization. It is said that if you were to know that one dharma is empty, then you would be able to attain the realization of how all phenomena are empty. This is according to 400 verses. Similarly, if you can have the full penetration of one root, then all the roots would also be liberated as well. So over here it says that once subdued root, it will return to inherent truth and radiate its innate brilliance. If you can understand one particular root, and then you would be able to understand all of the dharmas of the inner and outer. The Tibetan translation is that if you can understand one root and dispel the obstacles, all of the obstacles can be dispelled. Your mind would return back to the true mind, radiating the light of all kinds of merits. If you can understand one and eradicate obscuration of one, then you would be able to eradicate obscurations of all, so that your mind would return to its basic, to its essence, to its true mind. And at that time, at the time returning to its inherent truth and radiate its innate brilliance, when that brilliance shines forth, the remaining 5 adhesions will be freed to accomplish total liberation. Well, it means that at the time of recognizing the nature of your mind, you would be able to radiate light. But this radiant light refers to conducting meaningful things, carry out meaningful activities, unlike mundane beings would not be able to do so. So this light doesn't mean the actual light, rather it means that it's the light, luminous of Tathagata. At the time one truly recognized the nature, the function of the body, speech, and mind will be completely different than the ordinary beings. Rather, it would be the mind of luminous, and the mind of this radiant and brilliant mind can be discovered, can be clear, and the merits can be seen and can be perceived by all beings. When we look at the biographies of great masters of the past, in fact, each of the great masters, their particular way of attaining enlightenment may seem to be very simple, and some of the direct pointing out may seem to be very simple. The stanzas and the verses that helped those Zen masters to attain realization seems simple. Or looking at the moon, looking at the lamp, listening to the sound of the drum, or listening to the sound of the rebuke of a teacher. There are masters who attained realization through those simple instructions or simple sounds. But because of attaining enlightenment and realization, the various kinds of merits naturally manifested. It is just as stated over here. If one root is penetrated, then all the 5 adhesions will be freed to accomplish total liberation. At such time, one do not need to have objects to then have the consciousness of the organ to work anymore. So the Buddha over here says that do not follow the knowing and seeing that arise from objects before you. True brightness does not comply with the sense organs. You don't need to seek after the roots, the eye, ear, nose roots. The true brightness does not comply with those sense organs. Yet lodged at organs is the revelation of the brightness that permits the mutual functioning of the 6 organs. In fact, at the time of awakening, on one hand, we do not need these roots, but we can rely on the roots to attain awakening. We don't necessarily need the roots, but the eye roots, for example, can be functional at the time to help you to attain realization. But on the other, if you don't work in such a way, it could help you to also be tethered in the samsara as well. Sometimes whenever we see things and hear things that is impure, that lead us to be unhappy, then it could be a vicious cycle that could lead us to create negative karma. For example, if you hear something that you don't feel happy about, and then you couldn't sleep, and then second day you don't have much of energy to listen to class, and then you would not be able to receive the oral transmission, and then that would lead to wrong view and then wrong aspiration, and then that could lead to some kinds of vicious fruitions. So from that perspective, our roots is not necessarily all good. On the other, if you were to attain realization through one root, then at the time of attaining a noble fruition, you would be able to use the roots interchangeably. Also, I think you can train the roots as well to penetrate the roots. For example, some of the handicapped, some of the people that don't have all the roots perfectly functioning, they can surpass that of us who have those 6 roots working. Now the Buddha gives an example. Ananda, don't you know that now in the assembly there is Aniruddha who is blind and yet can see? First one, this is the example associated to the root of the eye. The Buddha said that, don't you see Aniruddha? This is Venerable Aniruddha. Within this great assembly, he doesn't have eyes, but he can still see the form. He's blind, yet he can still see form. I think we've studied this. Aniruddha was the prince of Shuklodana, the younger brother of Shuddhodana, the father of the Buddha. After he got ordained, for a period of time, he really liked to sleep in. And when I came in, I heard a Sangha member said that he really doesn't want to get up in the morning, wanted to sleep in as well. Maybe that's a sign that this particular Sangha member is about to have the divine eye as well. Anyhow, at that time, the Buddha then reprimanded him, saying that you're just going to be like a clam in the water that would not be able to listen to the Dharma for thousands of years if you continue to do so. Because of that, Aniruddha got very much ashamed of his laziness and then practiced for 7 days. That's how his eye root got blind. However, he attained the fruition of divine eye. After he attained the divine eye, he can see all phenomena of the 3,000-fold world just as if he's looking at a mango fruit within his palm. The next one is the dragon Upananda. The name means the virtuous, joyful dragon, a very positive dragon. Not so sure how this dragon could hear without ears, without the ear root. I believe there is a brief description of this dragon, but not a detailed story of this particular dragon according to Master Changshui. The king of dragon, though, was a mundane being, but he cannot hear through his ear faculty, but he can still hear sound. The next one is that the spirit of Ganges River, who has no nose and yet smells a fragrance. If you remember the description within Wish-Fulfilling Treasury, we talked about on the outside of the ocean without heated vex, there are the four totems of the animals, or 4 of the animal heads, out of which there is a silver made elephant, and from that elephant the water comes out is the river Ganges. The goddess to the river Ganges is the one that's referred over here. Her smelling of fragrance is not reliant on the root of her nose. Actually, there are lots of animals, lots of the sentient beings who would perceive not necessarily through their eye faculty or through their ear faculty to receive sounds or eye faculty to the forms. Now the next one is that Gavampati, who has an unusual tongue and yet sense flavor. According to Amitabha Sutra or another sutra, states that his name means cow cut, and even when he wasn't eating, he kept chewing his cud and eating coarsely like a cow. And that was because of his past habitual tendency of being a yak or being a cow. So he had lots of the habitual tendencies, and for such reason, he was not allowed to live with the Sangha. The reason of which was that when he was part of the Sangha, he then told a senior monk saying that, why are you not eating like the others? Why are you eating like a cow? And for that fruition, he then got the fruition of eating like a cow, eating and chewing his cud and breathing coarsely like a cow. He has already attained the fruition of arhathood, and then he has this, though he has this particular strange tongue, he can still taste flavors. Nowadays, there are actors and actresses who would play and particularly copy a certain type of strange way of tasting. But to Gavampati, he has an unusual tongue, and because of his past karma, he has this very strange tongue, but he can still taste flavor. He is a noble one that had already attained arhathood. And then the next one is that the spirit Shunyata, who has no body and yet is aware of contact. He doesn't have a physical body. However, he could still have a sense of contact and aware of the sensation of contact and tactile. It is said that his senses, like in the light of the thus come one, the spirit is illuminated temporarily as an ethereal essence without any substance. So his body is just like space. But if the thus come one would radiate out light, his body would be illuminated. But his body is just like wind without any substance. At the time of the thus come one retract the light, then his body would disappear as well. It is only when the thus come one would radiate light, his body can be shown, and at the time of retracting the light, his body would disappear as well, just like when there is wind, then so his body is just like the wind. And now the last one is on mind. Previously, we have already covered the other five. In the same way, there is also Mahakashapa in this assembly, dwelling the samadhi of extinction. Having obtained the stillness of a sound hearer, he has long since extinguished the mind organ, and yet he has a perfect clear knowledge, which is not due to mental process of thinking.
不因信念，就是他说这个
Mahakashyapa
这个什么，就是迦叶尊者的话呢，就是很久的他的这个
had long extinguished the mind organ where his dualistic thoughts and the mind organ has already been extinguished.
现在想象的六根色的话，那就是完全都是不起作用。
In fact, when we think of the clairvoyance and those kinds of miraculous penetrations and the creations of the noble ones are very much different than the sixth consciousness that we have, and not the same as how we imagined the sixth consciousness would work. The noble ones has already extinguished all of the impure roots, and they are simply seeing everything and understand all phenomena with their pure and ultimate roots. Those are not reliant on our mind and dualistic mind. Let's stop here today.